Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the ghost of Smedley Butler here with the ghost of Judge James Horton. There's been announced a Gaza ceasefire between the Israelis and Hamas. What are your thoughts on international ceasefires in the Middle East?
So many. How much time you got, fella? No, but seriously. My first question, I guess, would be who's taking credit for this? Who is taking credit and who should take credit?
Both the Trump and the Biden administration take credit for the ceasefire. I think both of them.
I think they both should.
I think they both have claims to that. Also, do you think it's going to work? I don't think Netanyahu wants a ceasefire.
There's certainly a strong contingent of the Israeli government. So
Netanyahu's got problems as soon as there's peace at home.
well, let's give some people a little background on Netanyahu, who he is. So Netanyahu is a hard right,
Leader of the Likud party.
borderline strongman who's the prime minister of Israel. He, like every Israeli does, he did his time in the military. In his fame, do you know where his rise to political stardom came from?
I want to say he was like a fighter pilot.
So it's actually his brother. So Netanyahu had a brother named Yanni, who was a Sayeret might call Israeli Special Forces. So back in the 70s, a terrorist group hijacks a passenger plane full of passengers, flies it to, I think it was Kenya, but it was Idi Amin's.
No, that was Idi Amin was in it wasn't Ghana, it was
Uganda?
Uganda.
Okay. So they flew it to some Central African country. I want to say Uganda.
Yeah.
So they fly out there, they land it, and here are all these hostages, most of which are Israeli, because I think it was maybe the plane was hijacked from Jerusalem or somewhere like that. But the point is that there's a lot of Israeli citizens there. And so the government authorizes a raid to go down and rescue these people. And so it's wild. It's like, they put them on a plane, they fly them into an enemy territory with no support, thousands of miles away from anybody that's going to help them. Pull off a raid, rescue all these hostages. Not a single hostage is killed. There's one Israeli death on the Special Forces side.
Is that Netanyahu's brother?
Netanyahu's brother.
Oh, yeah.
And so from that springs his entire political stardom. So he's a right-wing guy. He wins the election there, and he's been in power since what, early 2000s?
Yeah.
So like 20-plus years now he's been in power. Before all this broke out, he was really unpopular based on some judicial reforms that he was trying to push through.
Oh, the court system straight up said he was in violation of Israeli law.
Yeah.
And he straight up,
I mean, it was a power grab.
yeah, he ignored the law, told the judicial branch they were wrong, and he took the power and all that. So he's got a lot of issues domestically before the Hamas raid.
To your point, Netanyahu was on his last leg before October 7th, 23, which is Hamas's terrorist attack, and that's what it was on the Nova Music Festival and on that particular area of Israel broadly.
Well, my gut feeling about that Hamas attack is that Iran pushed for it at the behest of Russia to cause international chaos because Russia was getting their tails kicked in Ukraine.
I don't disagree that the Russians had a hand in that because it does benefit them. But also, this has been a powder keg forever. And regardless of the why it started, when it did start, it benefited Netanyahu because there's no way you're going to get a regime change while all this is going on.
Right.
Which I think has been one of the factors pushing against a ceasefire here. But to your question, doesn't pop off again because that was what you asked.
I think it pops off. I think the Israelis break the ceasefire and there's going to be something that comes up where like a hostage dies or something. It's going to be, and then the Israelis are going to push again.
And then they can say, we tried.
Yeah.
They fucked it up.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. The Israelis the way they've been behaving, they don't really want a ceasefire. They want, honestly, to wipe out the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. They've been breaking the treaty. I think, what was the Camp David Accord?
Camp David Accords.
Yeah. By putting settlers on the West Bank and all that. The right-wing government of Israel has been hyper aggressive with displacing Palestinian people, the Hamas and the West Bank. So I think it's a land grab. I think they're trying to whittle down the population of Gaza. I think I don't see this being resolved anytime soon. Trump Biden is at fault for not putting the brakes on Israel acting bad for years. And then when Trump got elected, Netanyahu and Hamas especially realized they better get a deal done, because if Trump came in, there wasn't going to be any deal done after that. That's my gut instinct about what's happening. But
so, should we give the people a background of, I guess, how we got here and why these people were pissed off at each other?
Okay. How far back you want to go?
I think I can do it in 5 minutes or less.
You gonna go back to Rome?
No, I mean, other than to mention that, Hebrews, like the Jewish faith, came from that area generally, and there was a diaspora under Rome some 2,000-ish years ago, where Jewish people end up sort of dispersed all over the place, right?
Well, the diaspora happened because of the revolt.
Yeah,
the Israelis revolted against Roman rule.
Really famous episode.
I can't remember. There was, anyway. They're on top of a hill,
yeah,
and whatever, and the Romans built
the Romans never actually take, and when they get up there, everybody's dead.
Yeah. They built a ramp, like they went whatever. The Romans doing Roman stuff. Anyway,
so then we get the diaspora,
right?
And Jewish people get spread out everywhere, all over Europe, all over parts of the Russian steppes, over parts of Africa. I'm talking everywhere. So we fast forward and
and then people move into
that vacated space. And not that those people weren't already there in some capacity, because as we see with all the current issues in the Middle East, if you think that all people in Iraq or Iran think of themselves as Iraqis or Iranians, they don't. They think of themselves as whatever tribe that goes back millennia in their area.
Yeah, but give people time frame. I think my gut instinct is like 200 AD, something like that, or when the diaspora happened.
But point is, even when the diaspora happens, there are other tribes living in that area.
Yeah. I
mean, sure, they take the particular areas that Jewish people were living, but there were always other people living in this area, even when it was predominantly where Jewish people live. So anyway, they get scattered all over the place from here to kingdom come. Lots of persecution because of minority groups everywhere, all throughout history. We get to the early 1900s, and there's something called the Balfour Declaration, where the Brits basically declare their support for creating a Jewish state in modern Palestine, which is important because Brits controlled Palestine. So they're the only ones that have the ability to do that sort of thing, because they control the territory.
Well, the French have Syria.
Yeah.
This is important because of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. You don't remember the Sykes-Picot Agreement?
Stump me.
The Sykes-Picot Agreement was them going back on the Balfour Declaration and dividing up the Middle East between the French and the English after World War I. It was a secret treaty that they did to keep that land. And the French got Syria. The British got
Palestine.
Palestine, Egypt, and Iraq, like Kuwait area.
Yeah.
And so that was the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
So anyway, we get that. Then World War II happens. Everyone knows about the Holocaust. Post World War II, there's a drive, and then in 1947, the State of Israel is created. It's split up what was then Palestine is split up, where I think 48% goes to create the new Jewish state of Israel. And
Well,
then,
there was no state. It was all British territory.
right. There was no government there. Yeah. There was no anything.
Well, what government was there was
British colonial.
And they were like, all right, I guess y'all can live here.
Yeah.
And so that was the first Jewish state, which was...
But what's interesting is Jerusalem was neutral.
Right.
It was in neither. Palestinians had 52% of the total land territory. And almost immediately there's violence.
Right.
There are clashes between the different ethnic groups. There are 2 wars that happen in the first couple of decades. There's Yom Kippur and there's a 6-day war, which is clashes between Israel and their various neighbors. One goes incredibly well for Israel. One goes mixed for the Israelis. But what we get is a situation where each time there's a conflict, the Israelis took comparatively more and more land. And we've also got a situation where Israel is being backed by the United States, being supplied with weapons, with money, being propped up. So you've got a very well-equipped, very well-armed Israel, and you have a sort of by the seat of your pants, much more mujahideen-like Palestine. Be they, whichever militant group has existed there, modern-day Hamas, but whatever else, right? So in recent years, you mentioned them settlements. You have these areas, like this is supposed to be a Palestinian area, this is supposed to be an Israeli area. But what happens is every year, progressively more Palestinian settlements get demolished, and they build Israeli settlements there. And so each year, the land that Palestinians have shrink, the land that the Israelis have grows, and rinse repeat. And then each time there's a conflict like this, it really speeds it up. And so that's where we are. That happens for decades. Tension builds, frustration builds in the Palestinian community, and then there's this explosion of tension, like what happened on October the 7th. Now, does that justify it? Hell no, it doesn't. I mean, we had 1,000 innocent civilians murdered, and was clearly an act of terrorism. But do we say all that to say that all of this tension, even if the Russians, like you're talking about, got involved and like sparked the match, all this tension was already there and was already building, and it's a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. And the question is, I guess, does Netanyahu's government have any interest in addressing this systemic issue?
I don't think they do, because they've shown no interest in stopping the settlements on the West Bank or in Gaza. They've actively funded those hardliners that want to go in there and do it. The IDF has been heavy-handed in dealing with any type of Palestinian, I won't say aggrievement, legally or not. So, I mean, it all comes down to, I really don't care. I just want peace there. And the biggest problem has been is that neither side wants peace because it benefits them financially. Because the more war and strife there is, the more funding comes in from other sources. So their little conflict has led to a power structure of strife.
So I would put it on slightly different footing. I think the incentive for Palestinians not to reach a ceasefire is, well, we've reached a bunch of ceasefires. We've tried it your way, and what did we get? Nothing, essentially. So,
right, but the Palestinians they've also, voted in Hamas, as a power structure.
Like 20 years ago.
Yeah, and Hamas took that, and they refused elections since then, and I think there's blame to go around on all sides here. I definitely think there's a power structure that incentivizes keeping the conflict going.
I think there are factors in place that from various parties that push towards keeping the conflict going. For the Palestinians, like I said, I think it's that aggrievement.
Yeah.
That, 80 years of
Getting their
you
ass
took
kicked.
from us and you gave us this deal. You gave us a shit sandwich. And then you've made it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And all that happens is we get starved, killed, and, like, maimed. So there's that incentive. Then there's the Israeli incentive that if this continues as it has in the last 80 years, eventually we'll get the whole damn enchilada.
Which, I mean, they're gunning for it, and I think they're going to get it.
I think they're going to get it too.
Yeah.
Each Palestinian that is killed or that flees. You know, that's why Egypt won't open its borders and let refugees in. Because every time they do, they won't let them back in.
Well, the refugees have caused problems everywhere they've been.
They're destabilizing for other,
Yeah.
even Arab countries.
Jordan.
Or Muslim.
Yeah. It's
Egyptians aren't Arab. Apologies.
Yeah. It's destabilizing when you have a large group of people with no
I think it
jobs
might
or
be
whatever.
Jordan where the largest ethnic group in Jordan are Palestinians.
I think it is, yeah. And I like the Jordanians. They seem to try to keep a level head and keep it down.
The royal family is just trying to stay in power there.
Yeah.
They're just hanging out and trying to maintain what they got. Yeah. But then I also think so those are the two actually involved players that have interest keeping the conflict going. But the third, I think, is there's a lot of foreign interests.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You mentioned the Russians. You mentioned the Iranians.
The Americans are there, in one.
We
capacity
would
or
like
another.
it to end simply.
Hezbollah is right there.
But
You know.
Hezbollah is Iran, right? Because I mean that's just one of Iran's many tentacles in the area, and I think we Americans clearly want it to end because our relationship with Israel has been the source of a lot of the animosity.
I mean, there's a lot of fundraising in America off that conflict. There's a lot of jobs off that conflict.
There are. So that defense money is not going anywhere. It's going to get spent anyway, regardless of whether
I'm
they're
talking
fighting
about
or not.
nonprofit stuff.
Yeah.
Lobbying.
Well, we know the Israel lobby here has always been strong, and a lot of it, to be honest with you, rather than being Jewish people, is evangelical Christians doing it on their behalf.
Yeah, I never
that's a
really
lot.
got that one, but it's
tied up in the theology of which I think is misplaced, that the Israelis are God's chosen people, therefore to be loyal to God you must also be loyal to the modern state of Israel, and it misses a lot there, and that
also it's a little pretentious to call yourselves God's chosen people.
So
just saying.
So the Israelis aren't. That's what's one of the weird things about
Self-proclaimed God's chosen people?
But they're not, though, because it's evangelical Christians who don't fit in that umbrella proclaiming them to be God's chosen people. So you don't get Jewish people saying, no, it's us, sorry. But like evangelical Christians believe that. But they also believe that they're simultaneously going to hell because they don't accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior.
And there's also some
but the point is,
revelation and prophecy.
Yeah,
going into that where the end of days are going to come once the Jewish state is reborn.
There's a new Jewish state, right? And so that's been a driving force, but behind traditional American support of Israel, and their strife, their conflict with other countries in the Middle East has really passed that animosity on from Israel to America. So that's where a lot of they hate us comes from. Yeah, actually. In fact, there are a lot of people in that part of the world that hate America. And a lot of it is down to our traditional relationship with the Israelis. So when you asked do we want it to end, I think the answer is yes. I think we absolutely want it to end. Simply because it hurts our interests in so many other places.
So it goes back to our original question. Will this ceasefire stick?
Well, I'm going to take a dodge, and you're going to be like, go to hell. But in the long term, obviously not.
Oh, come on.
Because, I know.
Come on.
Because like no ceasefire sticks there.
I'm saying in the next
6 months, will there be more combat there?
Yeah.
There will be other airstrikes. There also.
All right, that's that.
So
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go on a limb, and I'm going to say airstrikes are combat.
So the Palestinian Authority intends to take control there as far as governmental action goes.
You think Hamas is going to relinquish control?
I don't. And that's why I think you'll see more fighting.
Okay. I think you're going to see more fighting because Netanyahu needs it to stay in power.
Yep.
The PLA versus Hamas is going to be a fight.
The Russians and the Iranians wanted to keep going.
Yeah. I do think the Iranians are starting to distance themselves from Russia a little bit. I think they see Russia in a losing war.
Well, Russia's got nothing to offer anymore.
Yeah, they're out of money.
Because used to, what was Russia's main export to other countries? MiGs,
Oil.
tanks, oil and weapons.
Yeah.
That's what they sold.
And now their weapon systems have been shown to be absolute dog shit.
They've shown to be shit. They don't have their production capacity to continue to manufacture them because all their young men have been killed in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Not only
Oh,
that.
what was real embarrassing is Israel launched a airstrike with, F-35s against their Iranians had some S-300 anti-aircraft missile systems that just failed completely. Yeah. And they 10 of them got blown up by these F-35s.
In Syria?
Yeah, in Iran. Israel launched these strikes in Iran.
So the point about Iran's and Russia's relationship is now it's kind of flipped on its head, right? Where's the flow of military equipment right now between those two countries?
It's going to Russia.
It's going to Russia in the form of those Shahed drones that they keep launching.
Yeah, they put a motorcycle on some wings.
Right. So they're not getting military supplies from Russia. Well, they're not getting oil from them either because Iran has their own.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're past the point of Iran needing them,
unless they're trying to make an atomic bomb.
No, they don't need them for that. They don't need them for that.
So once again,
no.
Is this ceasefire going to stick? No.
So I've convinced myself in the last 5 minutes of our discussion that the answer is no.
I don't think it's. I think there's no way this thing's going to stick. And then we're going to have the Secretary of Defense Hexeth out there being like, well, if we could all get together and go to the same bar, we could just figure this out.
Right. I'm going to tell you what the problem is. It's because Hamas don't drink Jameson.
Yeah. Which is, airdrop some bourbon.
Right.
Into the sands of the Middle East.
Waterboard them with a little aristocrat and see where we get, No. I don't think the ceasefire will stick, although I think the Palestinian people desperately want it to. But I also think if we look within the Israeli government, there are Netanyahu's own power base doesn't want it to stick. They want to keep going,
right?
And so you got that. I'm not going to speak for like the rank and file, like quote unquote average Israeli citizen, because who fucking knows? I don't know. But as far as the Palestinian citizens go in Gaza, I think for them 46,000 casualties is enough.
Yeah,
more than half of which are women and children. I think they've had enough. Yeah.
There's been too much bloodshed over there. They need, all the fighting is not good for the economy. Mm-hmm. People need to eat and live their lives. So I think it'll stick for a week or two, and I think there'll be some more violence. I think it's going to be spot violence. I think it's going to be pop, 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 pop.
I do think this may be the start of a long end, quote unquote, to like the Gaza war.
Nothing's going to change until Netanyahu's out of power.
No, and I hate to say end because it doesn't really end. It just pauses.
Right. It won't end until one side's gone. So
it won't, and it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't, but that's a trajectory these people have chosen, and we're gonna ride it out till the end.
Yeah.
Anything else, Judge?
That's it from me, General.
All right. Have a good night.